Amid the dazzling lights of Hollywood, where the public only sees glamorous dresses and million-dollar smiles, truths are hidden that could make anyone hold their nose. There was a star who once stepped onto a film set in the same dress she had worn for 3 days straight. There was also a leading man who seemed debonair but kissed his co-star even though his dentures hadn't been cleaned for days. Few would suspect that these quirks, once dismissed as merely eccentric, could lead to illnesses, disrupt filming schedules, and cause job opportunities to slip away right at the golden moment. So, who were the faces behind these odorous disasters? And what really happened to turn these big-screen legends into the kind of nightmare no one wanted to get close to? The blacklist below will ensure you never see them the same way again. One, Marilyn Monroe, the set's bad odor and the skin condition that enraged Clark Gable. The first name no one would expect to hear on a list of repulsive habits would be none other than Marilyn Monroe. When people think of a beauty icon, they immediately picture shimmering platinum hair, porcelain skin, a smile that could melt any heart, and that legendary quote about wearing nothing but Chanel No. 5 to bed. However, behind the glamorous lights and picture-perfect frames of Hollywood lies a truth that would leave anyone wide-eyed. There was a day on set when Marilyn nearly made the king of Hollywood, Clark Gable, vomit right in front of the camera, just because of the smell emanating from her. It was the scorching summer of 1960, in the Nevada desert during the filming of The Misfits. The sun beat down, with temperatures soaring above 40 degrees Celsius. The wind blew sand into every crevice, even slipping under layers of makeup. In the makeup tent, Alan Whitey Snyder, Marilyn's makeup artist for nearly a decade, prepared not only powders, lipsticks, and mascara, but also industrial wet wipes, a bottle of Odor deodorant specially ordered from New York, and a container of medicated talcum powder normally used for patients with dermatitis. He was well aware of Marilyn's delicate habits, showing up on set in the same dress from the previous day, wearing the same unwashed underwear underneath, and, according to whispers from her personal assistant, once visiting a Beverly Hills dermatologist for severe irritation caused by tight clothing and a lack of proper hygiene. Joan, a wardrobe assistant, told the Los Angeles Times in 1983, "I was only a few steps away from her, but I felt as if I was inhaling a thick cloud. It wasn't the seductive scent of Chanel, but Chanel cooked for hours under the desert heat, mixed with sweat and a suffocating personal odor. It stuck in my throat and made me want to vomit right then and there." Director John Huston was preparing to film a sunset kiss scene, a moment that 20th Century Fox had sold as the most romantic scene of the decade. Clark Gable approached, trying to maintain his composure, but unconsciously clenching his fist. The camera started rolling. Marilyn leaned in, her lips approaching. Gable winced and turned his head slightly. Huston called for a cut and another take. On the second attempt, Gable leaned towards his assistant, Edward F. Purdom. His voice was tense as he fought the urge to gag. "Eddie, this woman's smell could knock over a horse. If I have to get that close to her face again, I swear I'll pack my bags and go back to the hotel right now." Fred Collins, a lighting technician, recalled, "We were several meters away, and it still hit us in the face." After that scene, Gable disappeared for nearly an hour, and Huston had to change the camera angle so he wouldn't have to get so close again. The Nevada State Journal merely hinted at the incident. Not all moments on a film set smell like roses. But for the crew, that sunset in Nevada wasn't just scorching. It was steeped in a smell no one wanted to remember. If Marilyn had forced the King of Hollywood to do everything possible to keep his distance, the silent film legend who followed created an odor disaster so severe that the editing room at United Artists had to open all the windows for hours so everyone could breathe. Two, Charlie Chaplin, the genius with a repulsive habit. Charlie Chaplin is still revered as an immortal icon of laughter, a genius who earned worldwide applause with City Lights, The Kid, and Modern Times. But for those who once worked alongside him, memories of Chaplin weren't just about ovations. They also carried an olfactory trauma that no one wanted to recall, especially during lunch. Crew members said Chaplin had an eerily extreme creative principle. When inspiration struck, he wouldn't bathe, change his clothes, or even wash his costumes. In 1928, during the filming of The Circus, Chaplin wore the same thick wool suit for 3 days straight in suffocating heat, with a shirt underneath soaked in sweat. When a costumer timidly suggested a change, he simply smiled and replied with his famous line, "If I bathe, all my inspiration will go down the drain." But the nightmare didn't end there. Chaplin almost never washed his hats or coats. The famous bowler hat from City Lights survived the entire shooting season without being cleaned once. In the end, the mix of sweat, tobacco, brandy, and studio dust had seeped in so deeply that anyone who touched it would immediately grimace and pull their hand away. A rumor from a United Artists costumer claimed that, after that season, the hat was sealed in its own cloth bag and no one dared to open it again. In the summer of 1931, while editing City Lights, the small, narrow room was hermetically sealed to keep out dust. Chaplin entered, greeting everyone warmly and speaking enthusiastically. 10 minutes later, editor Henry Bergman discreetly cracked open a window. 5 minutes later, another window was thrown open. Finally, all the windows were wide open, not because of the heat, but because people couldn't breathe. A technician told Variety magazine, "No one dared to say anything, but as soon as Chaplin left the room, we all ran into the hallway just to get some air." His longtime co-star, Edna Purviance, once risked it all by spraying a few drops of Garland on Chaplin's collar before a close-up. She recounted, half-jokingly, but with a nervous laugh, "I only did it to survive that day." Chaplin noticed nothing and continued acting as if nothing had happened. In a 1952 BBC interview, Chaplin calmly stated, "In the film, everything must be impeccable. In real life, I don't need to worry, and I don't need anyone else to care either." He truly didn't care. But those who worked with him thought differently. They still admired his genius, but they feared the sound of a door closing behind them when he was in the room. Three, Elvis Presley, the deadly breath that shook the MGM set. The next name on the list, Elvis Presley, the king of rock, brought a completely different kind of discomfort. It didn't come from his clothes or his body, but from his breath. A breath so potent that co-stars would turn their faces away mid-kiss, and that the American tabloids immortalized with a nickname his fans would never forget. Everyone thought Elvis Presley was the sweet dream of millions of women. but for those who had to get close to him. To kiss him on screen, it was an experience no one wanted to repeat. On a sweltering afternoon in 1960 at MGM Studios in Los Angeles, Mary Ann Mobley, Miss America 1959, stepped into a romantic kiss scene with Elvis. Under dazzling lights, the camera was rolling, and Elvis moved in. In a split second, Mary Ann felt a dense, hot wave of air hit her directly in the face. She tried to keep acting, but her eyes started to sting, and her throat went dry. As soon as the director said cut, Mary Ann turned and ran, fanning herself while gasping for air. My God, that smell stuck like glue. I wanted to throw up on the spot. Mary Ann recalled that the smell was nothing like usual morning breath. It was a lethal mix of burnt black coffee, damp Camel cigarettes, the bitter taste of codeine dissolving on the tongue, and a trace of stale liquor. It felt like being next to a hot trash can full of coffee cups, cigarette butts, and empty liquor bottles, as she told People. Susanna Lee, Elvis's co-star in Paradise Hawaiian Style from 1966, once revealed to the Daily Mail that she nearly fainted during a kiss scene. I tried to breathe through my nose, but the smell kept getting into my mouth and sticking to my tongue. It was like opening an old musty closet filled with melted mints, expired medicine vials, and half-smoked cigarettes. When they cut the scene, she ran straight to the bathroom to rinse her mouth. An MGM cameraman explained it bluntly. The reason was simple. Elvis used to drink 2 cups of black coffee, smoke half a pack of Camels, and pop codeine just before filming. He rarely rinsed his mouth. We called it the King's Breath. In February 1973, the National Enquirer ran the headline, Elvis's morphine-flavored kiss. The team denied it, but those who had endured it nodded knowingly. It was no exaggeration. Behind the scenes, people joked that anyone who kissed Elvis deserved a Hollywood Medal of Courage. Even Priscilla Presley, his ex-wife, admitted to Vanity Fair in 1995. There were mornings he'd kiss me right after waking up, and honestly, I just wanted to look away, but I loved him, so I said nothing. It's rumored that during the filming of Blue Hawaii, 1961, a supporting actress requested a scene change just to avoid getting too close to Elvis. Four, Elizabeth Taylor, exposed by the press for her strong odor habit. Next on the list was Elizabeth Taylor. In 1963, Elizabeth Taylor was at the pinnacle of her fame. On the covers of Vogue and Life, she embodied perfection, silk dresses, diamonds, and the elegant scent of Chanel No. 5. But in the scorching heat of a Roman summer, an Italian newspaper published a story that shattered that image. On August 15, 1960, the Corriere della Sera ran a short note. Filming of Cleopatra temporarily halted due to a health incident affecting a crew member. No names were mentioned, but everyone at Cinecittà Studios knew what had happened and who was at the center of it. The rumors of the smell spread quickly. Elizabeth Taylor would often go several days without bathing, relying solely on perfume to cover it up. According to Marco Bellini, her makeup artist that day, the set was enclosed, with an outside temperature near 40 degrees Celsius, and inside, even hotter under dozens of powerful lights. Taylor wore a royal gown weighing over 20 kilograms, along with a huge wig, and sweat was pouring off her. Between shooting days, she wouldn't change her clothes or bathe, just repeatedly spray Chanel No. 5. At first, the scent was pleasant, but mixed with sweat and melted makeup, it became heavy, suffocating, and clung to the room. About 10 minutes into filming, A wardrobe assistant bent down to adjust the hem of Taylor's dress, but within seconds she shot back up, covered her mouth, and staggered back several steps before vomiting on a prop rug. The set fell silent. Two nearby extras quickly walked out, holding their noses. The scene was immediately halted. The doors were thrown open. Industrial fans roared at full speed. Taylor was taken to a private area to rest while the rug was rolled up and removed. A lighting crew member confirmed to La Repubblica, it wasn't the first time. There were weeks when she wouldn't bathe for 3 or 4 days. Perfume can only cover it up at first. After that, it makes it worse. The studio made no comment, but the British tabloids, like the Daily Sketch, spread the story, calling it Cleopatra's nastiest secret. On screen, Taylor remained the legendary queen. But for those who were there, the indelible memory was of running out for fresh air, avoiding the sight of vomit on the golden carpet. Five. Clark Gable. The condition that made his breath infamously foul. Everyone thought Clark Gable was the definition of a true gentleman, elegant, charming, and captivating with every glance. But behind that polished image hid a secret that no one who got close could ever forget. His breath was unimaginably foul. It began in the 1930s, when Gable was at the height of his career. According to a former MGM medical staff member, the actor suffered from periodontitis from a young age. The disease caused most of his teeth to fall out, forcing Gable to wear full dentures at an unusually early age, a fact never publicly revealed during his lifetime. It might seem like just a cosmetic issue, but the real problem was that he had no idea how to clean his dentures properly. Each day, the acrylic plates pressed against his inflamed gums trapped bacteria, food particles, the aroma of bourbon, and the cigarette smoke that Gable consumed in excess. The result? A stench so strong that people behind the scenes called it Hollywood's deadly breath. Vivien Leigh, his co-star in Gone with the Wind, 1939, once whispered to columnist Hedda Hopper, "He's polite and charming until he gets close. When we kiss, I have to hold my breath, or I'd probably throw up." She wasn't joking. On set, everyone knew about Gable's smell. A makeup artist stated to NBC in 1965 that if he walked into a closed room, the smell would stick to your clothes like smoke and sting your eyes. The worst incident occurred in 1960 during the filming of The Misfits with Marilyn Monroe. An anonymous supporting actress told Variety in a rare interview, "The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it was like kissing a sewer lid." After that scene, she quietly left the set, went to the makeup room, and vomited. A Life magazine reporter who witnessed it wrote in the behind-the-scenes diary, "I've never seen a kiss leave someone pale in an instant." The story spread so widely that in the film world, the phrase Gable's breath became a euphemism for any unbearable experience. His poor hygiene didn't just traumatize his co-stars. It also had serious health consequences. Chronic gum disease led to frequent mouth infections and, at one point, nearly sepsis. Ironically, Gable himself had criticized Marilyn Monroe for her similar hygiene issues. But behind the scenes, he was worse. Still, no one dared to criticize him publicly. His image as the perfect gentleman remained intact until candid testimonies began to emerge after his death. Hollywood thought it had said goodbye to that horrible smell forever. But then, another madman appeared, Marlon Brando, bringing with him an even more persistent scent, one that came not just from his mouth, but from his entire body. 6. Marlon Brando, the scent of wild nights that haunted entire sets. Something no one expected from the legendary Marlon Brando was that he often forgot to bathe. Brando was once considered the embodiment of raw charm, the carefree look, the piercing eyes, and a voice that could hypnotize anyone. But off-screen, once he stepped away from the lights and into all-night parties, he left a very different legacy, a body odor that tormented anyone who got close. In the 1970s, Brando was a regular at the endless parties at the Chateau Marmont. People often saw him stumbling out of hotels at 5 a.m. with his hair disheveled, shirt collar wrinkled and damp with a strange mix of expensive cologne and the smell of someone else's skin. And that someone else, according to industry rumors, wasn't always a woman. Journalist Lawrence Grobel, who interviewed Brando in 1979, was stunned when Brando casually said, "I have loved men as I have loved women. I don't discriminate." But he added with a crooked smile, "The body always smells of the night before." Those smells of the night before became a nightmare for the crew of Apocalypse Now in the Philippines. In the humid jungle heat, Brando would often arrive late with dark circles under his eyes, the breath of stale liquor, and a shirt full of sweat stains from the previous day. But the worst, according to the makeup team, came when he sat in the chair. Within seconds of him leaning back, my throat tightened, a makeup artist recounted. The smell was as if someone had just dumped the trash from a seafood restaurant down the back of my neck. I had to pretend to yawn so I could turn away and hold my breath while I worked. In a close-up dialogue scene with Dennis Hopper, the camera caught Hopper subtly turning his head to avoid Brando's breath. Years later, Hopper admitted on a talk show, "I'm not kidding. I was genuinely afraid I was going to vomit. That smell was awful." Seven. Humphrey Bogart, the deadly breath that tormented his co-stars. And if Marlon Brando could move an entire set with a body odor that told a story, then the next person on the list could make you hold your nose every time you remember him. In March 1950, at the Warner Brothers headquarters in Burbank, a strange contract addendum was circulated internally. It contained a very specific line. Close-up scenes with Mr. Humphrey Bogart will require the following props: a vial of breath mint spray and a minimum distance of 30 centimeters until the director gives the command to act. No one outside the main crew could know why, until a former anonymous makeup artist revealed the truth years later. Bogart's breath could burn your nasal passages. Bogart chain-smoked, nearly 3 packs a day, which combined with untreated periodontitis, forced him to wear dentures. But that only made things worse. The metallic taste of whiskey and cigarette smoke mixed with oral bacteria created a disturbing combination. Katharine Hepburn once said in an interview, "I've never kissed anyone who made me cry like that. Not from emotion, but because my eyes were burning." His breath was like damp ashes that had sat in a drain for too long. Worse still, the director of The African Queen, John Huston, admitted he had to pause filming repeatedly because Bogart made his co-star so uncomfortable that her hands trembled during her lines. A script supervisor was even replaced after just 2 days because she couldn't stand the smell, which she described as something long dead, smoked with whiskey and cigarettes. After Bogart's death, an anonymous crew member told the National Enquirer, "No one said anything out of respect, but in reality, everyone feared the close-up kiss scenes. Some actresses turned down roles simply because Bogart was the lead." 8. Judy Garland. The neglect on set and the heartbreaking truth. The 8th person on the list was Judy Garland. On April 17, 1954, the set of A Star is Born remained lit until almost 3 a.m. Everyone was waiting for Judy Garland to appear for the film's climactic scene. An assistant rushed back and forth, whispering to the director, "She's on her way, but she doesn't look very good." Then, the makeup room door burst open. Garland appeared, but not as the radiant star the public adored. Her hair was a tangled mess, the red lipstick smeared, her eyes bloodshot, and the smell, an overwhelming mix of sour gin, sweat, tranquilizers, and the musty scent of unwashed sheets. Jack Carson, her co-star, approached, forcing a smile, but after a few lines, he froze, grimaced, and looked away. Carson muttered under his breath, "George, I can't get any closer. Don't you smell it?" The director signaled for the cameras to stop. The air on set was thick. A makeup artist came over to adjust Garland's dress, but immediately started coughing, covering her nose with her hand. A cameraman whispered, "This smell is going to stick to the entire set." The breaking point came when a young set assistant, only 2 weeks on the job, suddenly ran behind the prop line and vomited. The sound echoed through the silent set. Everyone froze, except Garland, who asked with a lost look, "What's wrong? Why is everyone looking at me like that?" The next morning, the Los Angeles Mirror hinted that a legendary star caused a filming pause due to a serious personal problem. Everyone in the industry knew it was Judy. And here was the cruelest irony. On screen, she shone like an angel. In real life, she had become a nightmare of personal hygiene, a victim of the addictions the industry itself had forced upon her. (9) James Dean. The scented room that caused nausea on set. The morning of July 21, 1955, on the set of Rebel Without a Cause. It was only 6:15 a.m., but the air vibrated with anticipation for James Dean's arrival. The door burst open. Dean walked in, his hair disheveled as if he'd just rolled out of bed. A wave of scent poured out, sweet, piercing, and so strong that everyone instinctively took a deep breath. French soap, Dior, Lucky Strike cigarettes, and unmistakably, the scent of skin still fresh from an intimate night. I stood next to Natalie Wood and saw her gaze linger an instant too long, but she wasn't the first to blush. A makeup artist who had cleaned Dean's dressing room just 10 minutes earlier rushed out as if she'd discovered a deadly secret. She whispered to me, her voice trembling, "There are still 2 indentations on the bed, and they're not a woman's. The smell of Marlboros is different from what Dean smokes." When I went in, the floor was littered with empty whiskey bottles, a man's shirt with faint lipstick marks, and in a corner, a pair of shoes that didn't belong to any wardrobe. A nearby lighting technician lowered his voice. "Dean didn't sleep alone last night, and I know exactly who it was." This secret, of course, was never made public. But everyone on set that day felt an unspoken tension. Dean's performance was brilliant, but his eyes seemed haunted. Just 2 months later, Dean died in a terrible car crash. The secrets of his nights, the room steeped in the smell of flesh and strong liquor, were buried with him. (10) Rita Hayworth. The goddess and the party that haunted Hollywood with its smell. And after the 1960s, another star came to light. Rita Hayworth, once called the Goddess of America, left behind offstage stories about her body that were even more unsettling. May 1958. Beverly Hills Hotel. Rita Hayworth arrived at the Paramount Charity Gala in a flaming red satin dress. But within minutes, that glamour was devoured by something no one wanted to believe was real. As Rita passed table number 7, some guests wrinkled their noses. It wasn't Chanel number 5, but a disturbing mix. The acrid smell of old liquor, the stale scent of dry sweat, and the faint musk of skin untouched by soap. A witness, journalist Dorothy Kilgallen, later wrote, "It wrapped around you and wouldn't let you breathe." The real disaster occurred when Rita sat next to director George Cukor. Less than 10 minutes later, a young rising actress at the next table suddenly stood up, ran to the bathroom, and vomited. A photographer accidentally captured the entire moment. The disgusted looks from guests, hands discreetly covering noses. Just 48 hours later, an edited clip aired on a tabloid TV show with a sarcastic voiceover. Here is Rita Hayworth's latest fragrance, and it's causing a stir all over Hollywood. The footage spread quickly, shattering the image of the red-headed goddess. Paramount tried to suppress the story, but the tale of that night became an underground Hollywood anecdote, one that made people shudder just thinking about it. But if you think Rita was the peak of hygiene scandals, you're mistaken. Just a few years earlier, Hollywood had witnessed the rise of another legend. Errol Flynn not only terrified his co-stars with his smell, but had personal habits that forced entire film crews to evacuate mid-shoot. Errol Flynn. The day the entire Warner Brothers crew had to flee. Burbank, summer of 1951. Stage 4 at Warner Brothers was suffocatingly hot. The high-powered lights made the air as thick as an oven. The crew of Adventures of Captain Fabian was on edge, preparing for the climactic scene. At that moment, Errol Flynn appeared. From a distance, he was still the image of the swashbuckling gentleman. But as soon as he took a few steps closer, the air changed completely. A heavy wave hit them, an oppressive mix of stale rum, half-burnt cigarette smoke clinging to his hair, thick sweat from an entire week without bathing, and the musty, salt-stained fabric from a high-seas shoot 2 days prior. It wasn't just a bit unpleasant. It was the kind of smell that could throw you off balance. Actress Marilyn Presley later recounted, "When he leaned into my face to say his lines, I could barely breathe. My throat seized up, and I had to hold my breath until the director yelled, 'Cut!' But the real shock came on the third take, when Flynn ran to embrace his co-star. The director's voice came through the crew intercom, muttering, 'Someone open a window right now, or I'm going to puke right here.' Seconds later, a pale-faced extra ran out and bent over to vomit into a trash can by the door. No one realized the second camera was still rolling, capturing the entire incident. That footage, according to a former sound technician, was secretly sold to Confidential magazine by an anonymous staff member. The magazine published it on a full page with a flaming headline, "Errol Flynn, the smell of a legend." The article revealed the cause. Flynn had just returned from an all-night party at his home, with cigarettes, strong liquor, and guests of both sexes. He left the party at 5 a.m. and drove straight to Warner Brothers, still in the same clothes from the night before, without showering. The scandal didn't just make Flynn's reputation wilder. It became a public joke. Radio shows even made fun of it with skits featuring Errol walking on set and forcing everyone to wear gas masks. 12. Howard Hughes. The obsessive compulsion for cleanliness. And then Hollywood saw the polar opposite in Howard Hughes. Instead of neglecting his body, he was pathologically obsessed with cleanliness, washing his hands until they bled and living in sterile rooms that looked more like morgues. In December 1968, anyone who stepped onto the top floor of the Desert Inn at that time remembered the feeling of being swallowed by a giant with no natural light, only the suffocating smell of antiseptic alcohol mixed with the plastic scent of tablecloths and sheets wrapped in 3 layers of nylon. Howard Hughes, the billionaire film director and aviation tycoon, once the most powerful man in Hollywood, now lay like a skeleton hidden among hundreds of tissue boxes stacked like walls. He wore faded pajamas that hadn't been washed in months, but demanded his servants disinfect their hands with alcohol until their skin burned before passing food through the door. A former employee later told the Los Angeles Times, "I once saw him make an assistant wash a can of soda 30 times before bringing it in. I accidentally placed the food tray just a few inches from the door, and he screamed over the speaker, 'Get back! You're letting germs in.'" Even more shocking, amidst the overwhelming smell of Lysol, there was another scent, the stale smell of unwashed sweat soaked into his hair and sheets. He feared the world was dirty, but didn't realize he himself was rotting in that obsession. When Hughes died on his private jet in April 1976, medical staff reported he had fingernails as long as bird claws and his breath reeked from years without dental care. Yet, strangely, his body still carried a faint scent of Lysol, the aroma he believed would keep him clean until the end. 13. Montgomery Clift. From Hollywood icon to a walking disaster. Unlike Hughes, who hid from the world, Montgomery Clift collapsed in full view of everyone. And from then on, the smell of liquor, dried blood, and painkillers became an unforgettable shadow whenever he stepped into the light. The night of May 12, 1956, a screech of tires cut through the darkness, followed by the horrifying crunch of metal. Montgomery Clift's car crashed into a tree outside Elizabeth Taylor's house, an accident that shattered what was once considered the most perfect face in Hollywood. The first to arrive was his close friend, Kevin McCarthy. McCarthy later stated to Vanity Fair, "When I opened the car door, I almost threw up instantly. The thick stench of blood mixed with stale whiskey, painkillers, and the acrid smell of half-burnt cigarettes." Elizabeth Taylor, still in her dazzling evening gown, rushed out, knelt beside Monty, and reached into his mouth to pull out a broken tooth that was blocking his airway. That image would later be hailed by Life magazine as the life-saving moment in hell. But for many, the most haunting memory was the smell, the mix of blood and liquor clinging to Liz's hands all night, forcing her to wash them dozens of times before it disappeared. After the accident, Monty never fully recovered. He lived in constant pain, dependent on morphine and alcohol. Colleagues said you could tell when he was on set simply by the smell of alcohol, painkillers, and long unwashed clothes. A novice cameraman once whispered, "It's like a mobile hospital, except this patient is still acting." Monty continued working, but his body and mind deteriorated. People began calling him the acting corpse, a cruel but fitting nickname. "14. Joan Crawford. the woman obsessed with bathrooms. And then came the complete opposite of Monty. Joan Crawford, obsessed with cleanliness to a pathological degree, willing to turn any house she lived in into a flawless laboratory. A veteran columnist once said, "Joan's house is not a home. It's a large-scale sterilization lab. Blindingly white walls and the intense sting of Lysol so strong it burned your sinuses." A new assistant told The Hollywood Reporter, "If you left a fingerprint on the glass table, she would explode. She made me clean until the cleaning solution overpowered her own perfume." One evening, the young actor John Ireland was invited to dinner, but instead of warm conversation, he watched Joan re-wash every glass in front of her guests. "I felt like I was dining in a hospital, not a dining room," John recalled. Ironically, Joan once made an elderly guest who vomited from the overwhelming smell of bleach clean the area herself before she was allowed to leave. Joan's compulsive cleaning not only drove away many colleagues, but also became a topic of conversation in the backstages of Hollywood. 15. Tallulah Bankhead, the hellish apartment that made people vomit on sight. But if Joan was the icon of "so clean it's sick," then Tallulah Bankhead, the celebrated star of Broadway and Hollywood, was at the exact opposite end. New York, August 1965. A journalist once said she had never experienced a greater shock than when she entered Tallulah Bankhead's apartment. The moment the door opened, a wave of mixed odors, stale cigarettes, cheap gin, days-old sweaty food, and something akin to a dead animal's decay hit her full in the face, forcing her to cover her mouth. The living room, once photographed for Vogue, now looked like a battlefield. On the table was a silver tray with moldy oysters from a party the month before, overflowing ashtrays on the carpet. A building maintenance worker once swore, "I saw a rat chewing on a pizza crust right in the middle of the living room," and she just laughed out loud, saying it was her roommate. But the real shock came when a young director arrived to negotiate a contract and, without realizing, sat on the corner armchair. Seconds later, he leaped up in a panic upon discovering that under the torn cushion lay the dry, stiff corpse of a cat. The stench that rose from it was so strong that he vomited right there on the carpet. The entire scene, ironically, was captured by a press photographer standing outside the window. The photo of Tallulah, laughing next to a man vomiting quickly, appeared on the cover of the New York Post with the headline, "Tallulah's House of Horror." When confronted, Tallulah blew cigarette smoke in the reporter's face and said in a raspy voice, "If they want the smell of roses, they can go to someone else's house, not mine, darling." That comment, along with the shocking photograph, marked the end of the glamorous image she had once built. And with that, Hollywood closed the chapter on a long list of legends whose dazzling public personas hid private lives so unsettling that no one wanted to get close. These are the bad secrets that Hollywood tried to keep buried for decades. Behind the spotlights and the glossy magazine covers, the truth can sometimes leave people more stunned than any movie. What about you? If you met them in real life, would you have the courage to approach and start a conversation? Which story left you the most shocked? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more shocking stories from behind the scenes of Hollywood.